You know when trusting yourself gets the hardest? When big change comes out of nowhere, or maybe even when you decided you wanted to make big change happen in your life and you're in the midst of navigating this huge ocean of newness. Today, we're going to talk about how self-trust is the hardest thing to do, but the greatest gift and tool you can cultivate during times of big change. And I am going to get a little personal today and tell you about how true this has been for me in my life, hoping that I can serve as a reminder that if it's true for me, it's true for you. Hi, I'm Mory, Intuitive Life and Leadership Guide, and my purpose is to remind you that every answer you seek is within. All right, so change is one of the hardest things we humans as a species endure. And there is some biology to this that makes it really clear that not only is change something that feels intellectually challenging, but it can feel physiologically challenging. It can feel challenging to our bodies, to our emotions, and to our brains. And that's because of a little thing in your brain called your amygdala. That is the center of your brain that is created to detect danger. So if you're familiar with fight or flight, this is the part that goes SOS, it's time for fight or flight. And change often triggers the amygdala, sending a signal to it to say, there is stress, this is dangerous. And so just know that if change scares you at all, or if you're in the middle of navigating change and you feel overwrought with emotion or anxiety, that little amygdala in your brain is part of the reason why, because it's noticing a shift in anything. It can be a shift in your schedule. It can be a shift in the amount of sleep you're getting. Research shows that when you change a job, for example, or lose a job, there is a universal pattern of sleep loss. Not because you don't like your new job, and not even because you're worried, but because of the loss of known patterns. Meaning that you had a routine in the old job and it has shifted in any way. And that shift of I'm going to wake up at this time, or I have to be online at this time, or maybe you've gone from being in the office to remote, whatever it is, whatever pattern you were in, when you shift into a new pattern, the amygdala goes, uh-oh, something is off here. And so that is sending a threat response. And they're finding that when a job change happens, universally people are reporting sleep loss. Here's another example of change. And this is even a positive one for any of you that are parents. When you bring home a new baby, it's a joyous experience. It's a good change. But there's so much change in your routine and such constant novelty and newness that research finds that there is a change in immunity. Your immune system is more repressed because your body is sort of shutting down a little because of this novelty and this newness. So I'm giving you all this science so you understand that if change is challenging you right now or ever has, there is a biological, physiological reason for it. Our bodies are created to detect danger, and our brain wrongfully can detect change as danger. But here's what interests me the most that I want to focus on with you today, which is that when we are in this fight or flight response and when we're navigating a new environment, whatever that might be, we are more prone to doubt ourselves because there is new stimulus coming our way, new information coming our way. And hopefully watched my last videos, what you'll know is that when we are presented with information and a decision we have to make, we've been trained that the answers sit outside of us. We've been trained that experts and others know better than we do. So we don't naturally go inward. Now, especially when we're in high stress from our brains telling us we're in danger, we're going to go even further away from our inner wisdom because of that training. So change and self-trust don't always coincide because self-doubt is louder. But the problem is, self-trust is the most graceful, easy, dignified, grounded way to navigate change. And I am living proof of this. I have faced so much change in my life. And if I'm being honest, I think it's because I require change to feel engaged in life. I can get bored pretty easily, but I also like to push myself. I feel like in this lifetime, part of my soul's purpose is to expand into as many new experiences as possible. And so change has always been a part of the way I've lived my life. Doesn't mean that it was stress-free, and it doesn't mean that I did it with self-trust every single time. But as I've cultivated this practice of listening inward and following my intuition and trusting my wisdom, I've noticed a big difference in the way I navigate change. And I think some of the biggest changes for me that have been self-trust related have spanned all three of the big areas that people say cause serious stress: divorce, job change, and moving to a new state. All three of those things happened for me in the span of 10 years. And all of those things were motivated by me. I am so grateful that I am the one who decided to do each of those three things. But with that decision, when the change happens and it's not as easy as you think, there's even more self-doubt. There's a little bit more pressure because you're the origin of shifting your life, disrupting your life, that when it doesn't go the way you expect right away, or you face challenges, or you're learning something new about yourself, which is painful, the first place that I can often go is like, wow, were you right to do that? Were you right to listen in? The first one really being my divorce. I got divorced when my kids were really little. I got married really young. I was 25. I had my first child at 28, my second by 30, and by 31, I was separated. So I had a 3 and a 1.5-year-old by the time I was separated and navigating a divorce. And God, there's nothing like being at the end of your rope on a Wednesday after you've been at work until 6 o'clock and you come home and it's 7:30 and you're home with 2 toddlers and you're just trying to get them fed and bathed and in bed, and you're tired and exhausted and maybe they're having a bad day. There's nothing like that stress to make you just look at yourself and be like, what did you do? Why would you make a decision like this? So self-doubt was really loud for me, I think, in moments of exhaustion or like just being at the end of my rope. And the way that self-trust really saved me in those moments is by telling myself, hey, if you want to try to learn to have faith in yourself, why don't you give yourself tonight and see how you wake up feeling tomorrow? Or just give this a week and see if you still feel so regretful or doubtful about your decision a week from now. The time and space away from the stressor of the change, the little moments of stress, to reevaluate the change are so critical. And part of trusting yourself is giving yourself the space to hear all of the wisdom within you that moved you towards that change. That wisdom is not going to be louder than the anxiety and the fear and the doubt, because remember, the amygdala is trying to keep us alive. So you have to take space from the stressor, from the moment, and give your wisdom a chance to remind you why you created the change. Same goes for my career. I left a very, very successful career at the world's largest PR firm. And I did it because I was genuinely feeling a lack of fulfillment in my soul. I knew that I wanted to do more to help people. And I wanted to use my skills of problem solving intuitively to help people be free of self-doubt. And I, again, single mom, made this decision to bet on myself and navigated my way out of this really secure role knowingly. I knowingly pushed myself out of that role. And there were times, and continue to be times almost a decade later, where I'll want to make an investment financially, or a client that I really wanted won't work out, or my own trauma of scarcity will pop its head up and say, uh-oh, there just won't be enough to put your kids through college or take this trip you want. And in those moments, because of that massive change, the self-doubt always pops up to say, you put yourself in this situation. Should you have done this? Look how secure your career was. And again, the space The space from that initial thought, that hard day, that disappointing news, and the next day has always been life-changing. I always tell people, give it one sleep, especially when you're in self-doubt, and just see how you feel the next day, and then give it 2 sleeps, and give yourself some grace and some time. But also, I live by this rule. Look for evidence. I have had to, in my life of navigating change, changing my career so dramatically, working for myself, showing up now as an author and a teacher and a guide and a coach instead of a communications PR crisis strategist. I've had to constantly look for evidence about how my life is more on track towards my purpose, how much more fulfilled I feel, how much freer I feel, how much more in line with my soul's purpose I feel every day. And looking at the impact I make on people's life has been so important in the moments when the doubt wants to remind me of all the reasons why this is too hard. That the constant, gig economy, the looking for the next client, the wanting to have the book be selling, all of this work I have to put into it, the self-doubt wants to remind me of all the reasons why not. But the evidence wants to remind me of all the reasons why. So I hope that you can think about those 2 things, the one sleep, the space, and also the evidence in how this change is for your highest good. Because this is the thing. When you're learning to live with self-trust, when you're learning to tap your inner wisdom and really live by this inner GPS, it is so important to remember that you are transforming the quality of your life. That by choosing to live from the inner compass, you are choosing you, which is a whole different life. It is going to look and feel different. And it may not always be easier, but it is always better. So look for the evidence of how it is better to choose yourself. Look for evidence for how this change is causing you to expand and grow. Because for those of you that are on the journey of self-trust, that want to build this relationship with intuition and live guided by that knowing instead of other people's answers, then if that's true for you, what I also know is true for you is that your soul is the kind that desires growth in this lifetime. And there is nothing more expansive than change. Self-trust is a muscle that you have to build. And guess what? Change is the weight. Change is that barbell. It is helping to create that muscle even more. So instead of feeling like any change that you're navigating that is creating hardship or pain or sadness or doubt is the wrong decision because it hurts, because it's painful, because it's harder, I want you to now reframe it and realize my soul must have chosen growth in this lifetime. And growth in this lifetime is only facilitated by trusting self, is most fulfilling when it is aligned with my inner truth and my inner wisdom. And so if that's true, change is not an obstacle or an impediment, even though it's painful. It is the weight. It is allowing me to grow that self-trust even more. I hope that you watch this video if you're in the middle of a change or you're thinking of making a change and you're afraid, or if you are full of self-doubt right now because you've made the change and it's challenging. What I hope you take away from this is that whatever in you chose to shift, even if you chose it subconsciously, even if you're in the story, this change is happening to me, know that there's a part of your spirit that craved that change because we are constantly co-creating our reality. And what we desire at the core of our being, that is the truth of our spirit. So if you are in the midst of a change, whether you believe it's caused by you or whether you believe it's happening to you, it is because your soul wants you to grow. And the only way to grow through this with grace and with total alignment to yourself is to trust yourself. So don't let that self-doubt convince you that you were wrong, or that you don't have what it takes to navigate this, or that this is just too hard and you should go backward. This is the moment when the doubt is the loudest to turn towards self-trust instead. And again, I'm not saying it's easier, but I promise you it's better. Well, that was a personal one. I really believe that if I can share with you my own path, it's easier to feel that you can walk those same steps, because a teacher, a guide should never be guiding you from up above. A teacher and a guide should be walking next to you, experiencing life and being honest about how much it's challenged them and what they've learned. And I just know that if you have subscribed to this channel, if you are a follower of mine in any way, that you have a deep desire to return to self. And I know that you can do it. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't yet, subscribe so that you can get more of my videos, and I'll be back again next week with a new video. Bye.